Hey everybody, it's Danny from Board Game Sanctuary. Good to see you again. Today we're going to be talking about t-shirts, narratives in board games, as well as Artisan of Splendent Vale. Let's go! Welcome to Talking Sanctuary episode 2, and I can't believe we've already made it this far. I just want to first of all say a huge thank you to the wonderful feedback that I got from the first episode, and it just gives me that motivation to really try and connect with you guys a lot more, and thank you for all your wonderful comments that appeared under the first video. I'm so excited to continue doing this. So today I'm going to answer one of the comments that appeared under the first video, and that was about this t-shirt that I got. This t-shirt was actually purchased by my hubby for my birthday actually, and he basically went to, I think it was threadless.com, found a Catan style inspired t-shirt, and I think there's artists that kind of have their own little shops up there where they upload some of their artwork and sell their artwork that can be printed out on t-shirts. And he also got some other ones like this really cool BMO one here as well. So thanks James for asking that question, and if you want to check that out, definitely go. So the main focus of this video that I really wanted to hone in on is the idea of telling a really good narrative through board game mechanics. And there are two aspects that I really want to touch on. The first is character immersion. How do board games actually capture the characters that the designers envisioned in their mind, and how do they translate them into the meaningful choices that players can take when they're literally opening the lid of a game, stepping into the game, and then playing in the shoes of those characters? Do the characters' choices feel organic, or does it feel a little bit disconnected? The other thing that I really want to chat about is how do board games actually generate conflict? Because without character arcs and character journeys and big overarching threats, stories can't really evolve if the characters aren't put through a lot of those threats. And I'd like to share with you some games, kind of like a teacher at school actually, where I'm going to showcase and do a little bit of a show and tell of certain games and how they've been able to achieve those two things just through the choices and the design elements that they've put into their games. Also, before we do that, I want to add to the discussion about the difference between a role-playing game and a board game. Now, role-playing games, I guess, are a little bit more organic. You do have a DM or a game master. So if you, for example, if you're playing Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, the threats and the combats are going to appear organically, and the results of those are going to be determined by dice rolls and whichever game mechanics you're using depending what RPG you're playing. And the characters are often built by the players themselves. They're created, they're named. I mean, there might be some structure around character creation, but generally speaking, you would create a character, give them their backstory, and try and fit them and let them explore this world. With board games, I like to describe them more like video games, where if you buy like a Legend of Zelda game, most of the story encompassed inside that game is kind of pre-scripted or pre-written, and it's up to the players to kind of play through that story. And a lot of board games are a little bit pre-scripted in that way. But that's not to say that they're not open world, and we'll find out a little bit about that in this video. So I think there is a big difference between them, but there are some overlapping similarities between board games that use elements of RPG in their design to kind of evoke that sense that players do have a lot of creative control. And that's what this whole Talking Sanctuary video is all about. First game I wanted to show you is called Witness. It's basically a crime deduction mystery solving game for 4 players exactly. It's actually an adaptation of the game Telephone. So basically what's going to happen in this game is players are going to open a case from the casebook, and they're graded based on their level of difficulty. They're going to read the case, and then each person in the group is going to choose a character. Now, what's going to happen is each person is going to open to the page of the case that they've chosen, and they're going to be given a little clue. And basically, each person has a different part of the clue that is required to solve the mystery. Players aren't going to be able to talk to each other, per se, in an open way. What's going to happen is players are going to follow this little guide here. It'll say which character is talking to who. And so one character or one player will be talking to the other player, and the other player has to just sit there and listen and try and confirm the details that they've been given. And then, just like in telephone, player's going to be passing this information along across 4 rounds. At the end of the 4 rounds, there'll be a little bit of a test, and each player will have to answer a series of questions to try and solve the crime in the crime book. Now, what do I like about this game that really evokes a sense of story? Well, if you're a detective, one of the main things that happens is you go around and you gather evidence. You interview people, you talk to people, you discuss certain details, and this whole sense of talking to one person and then moving over and talking to the other is just so immersive. You really feel like a detective in this game trying to solve this really important puzzle. And I think the combination of the embodiment of the actual characters as well as trying to solve the crime together as a group, but not having all the information that you need, just creates for this amazing amount of tension. And Mice and Mystics is probably one of the first board games that I ever purchased. And what I love about Mice and Mystics is it captures that sense of a dungeon crawler, but simplifies in a way that's appealing to families and children. Now, what I really like about this game is that players can choose to take on the role, I think, of up to 6 different mice characters. And basically, they're playing through a campaign as directed through this book called Sorrow and Remembrance. So at the beginning of a campaign, one player is going to read the text, and then as you play through, it takes you through how to set up the dungeon tiles, and also when you enter different rooms, what sort of new rules or new strategies or items might appear. It's basically this book literally takes on the role of the game master and walks players through this very cooperative game. Now, what I am drawn to by Mice and Mystics, and I was a huge fan of Redwall, this evokes and really taps into that nostalgic love. And it's definitely a game that I recommend if you want a game that has a very appealing theme but also an engaging story. The only caveat I'll say about this is that some of the rules can be a little bit tricky to get your head around, but generally speaking, the production value of this game is so good that I think they've even given the rights to a particular studio to actually turn into a film. Above and Below is by one of my favorite all-time game designers, Ryan Lockett. And if you're new to board gaming, you should definitely check out a lot of Ryan Lockett's games because all of the artwork is illustrated by him, all of the game mechanics and designs are created by him. He's even created this world of Arsium, where there's a series of board games that are all set in this world that he has conjured up. And I think that's a really amazing achievement because to create a world where multiple board games feature different storylines that players can kind of jump into is just really mind-blowing. Now, what I like about the storytelling in Above and Below is that players are building this village. It's like a little tableau building game of buildings above the ground, but throughout the game, players are going to be venturing beneath the earth to find more space to expand their town. And as they go beneath the surface, they'll find and encounter some pretty cool stuff. So basically, whenever players want to go underground, they draw one of these cards, and this card has some dice numbers as well as page numbers or encounter numbers. And players will basically roll the die, look at the number on the card, and then go to this encounter book. They'll turn to the number in the book, and then another player will read out some story text and provide the active player or the exploring player with a choice. The choice might be to steal something from the player or to use a piece of equipment to investigate a little bit further. And the book encounters themselves add that extra story flavor to the game experience. So as I'm trudging down underneath the ground, I'm presented with this situation from this book, and then all of a sudden I've got to deal with the situation that's presented to me. And depending on my choice, determines on how many resources I'm actually going to get. This is such a simple yet ingenious idea that incorporates storytelling, despite the fact that it's scripted, into the game itself. Now, this is super exciting for me. Now, in preparation for this video, I'm gonna give you a little bit of a behind the scenes insight. I've actually got all my games splayed out on the floor, ready to go. So you can see there are some of my games that I'm gonna be talking about. This is a pretty cool thing to just be even chatting about, and I don't think I'll be able to cover all of this in one video. There's so much to tap into in this topic alone. The next two games I'm going to talk about tap into that nostalgia as well. If you remember those choose your own adventure books from the 80s and 90s, well, they have re-released them as board games. House of Danger and War with the Evil Power Master. I think these are the only two available that you can get. Basically, the game comes with some decks inside, which are kind of like chapters from the book, and it's not identical to the book. There are some abridged sections, but basically what you'll do is you'll be reading through different chapter cards. You'll also have like a little danger level track, and then you'll be acquiring item cards that you'll use. And then basically what you'll be doing is making choices. You'll be presented with a situation and it'll say, do you want to be tested for this particular attribute? And then you roll and you use your items to try and negate some of the threats, and then you'll progress through the actual story. Now, the story moments are pretty funny, especially in House of Danger. Now, I know War with the Evil Power Master does introduce a little map that allows you to travel, so it's a little bit more open world exploring, I guess, whereas House of Danger is a bit more linear. It kind of takes you through a sequential storyline. This is just a really cool way of getting you to feel like you're walking in the shoes of a character. I know you're collecting items and I know you're rolling a die, but being able to see through the character's eyes, and I know as a child I often read a lot of these choose your own adventure books, being able to transform that narrative into a walk-through adventure, kind of like Return to Zork or Myst, it's just really cool. The beauty of this game is you don't have to play it with anyone else. So if you're in lockdown and you're just looking for a really good game that you want to play, but also don't want to invest too much money in, House of Danger is a really good game because it literally covers 5 sessions. You can play it on your own, or you can play it with your significant other. And it does come in this really cool box that could sit on your shelf, kind of like a novel. So the next game I'm going to chat about is a game that really divided the board game community on its first release. And it did introduce the idea that board games can't always be replayed, and it is time stories. This introduced the idea of buying extra modules to continue playing the game known as time stories. And the best way to explain this is, imagine buying a Nintendo Switch and then having to buy multiple games to be able to continue playing different games on the Switch. In this game, the way people communicate and share information is incredibly immersive. Throughout the game, players are going to be going to different rooms that are splayed out on cards like this. So it creates like a little panoramic scene, as if you're walking into the room of whatever location that you're in. There's different themes. There's like a zombie game, and there's also an Egyptian and a dragon one. This one's an asylum themed module that it comes with the base game. But basically, you get to decide which part of the room you want to visit. And whoever visits that room gets to take the card and look at what's on the other side. Only that player who goes to that part of the room will know what's on the other side of that card. And so when players visit this room, what they're going to be doing is spreading out to all the different parts of the room so that they can explore it. And then all of a sudden, each player has a different piece of information that they need to relay verbally back to the rest of the group. So if I go to this particular card and there's like a picture of a woman and there's a piano, I'll need to relay that back to my group. And I can relay that not in the way where you have to read a script, but you paraphrase it in your own words, as if you are in the room, in the situation, at the time of the actual investigation. And that's what I really liked about this game. The fact that you could just explore different places, and it comes with a little map, so you can say, ooh, let's go down the hallway to the billiard room, or let's go underground. The information and mystery that you would uncover would be so engaging. Have you ever been to the game shop and seen them sell this product? It's called Story Cubes. Basically, it's a pack of cubes where it's got lots of different symbols on them, and the idea here is to roll these cubes to then give you ideas to create your own narratives and stories. These dice are intended for use with this game. It's called Untold Adventures Await. What you are doing throughout the game is you are improving and creating your own TV show. You're basically going to open this board. There are 5 different little panels, and each round you're going to reveal a panel which is a part of your episode from the TV show that you're creating as a group. You'll be creating characters for the show, you'll be creating the storyline as well as the overarching conflict, and then what you'll do is, and it becomes randomized each and every game, you open these tiles. This one's called a dangerous dilemma. You flip the tile over, and then it has particular icons that tells you certain things. This icon here tells you where the story is set at the beginning, and this here tells you about the conflict and the type of conflict that's going to occur. Then, throughout the round, players are going to be adding information that kind of details how the characters in this show deal with the conflict. The game guides you by using reaction cards. So there's cards like this that show you how characters react to certain situations. So the game guides you through the whole writing process of the show. So it could be something like, the characters defeat the villain, but the villain's sidekick now steps up into the throne and decides to rule the kingdom or empire. It really funnels in all of those cool ideas that players have into a very simple yet engaging structure. Now these little crevices here basically are for you to put those story cubes, because each round you'll roll the story cubes and then you'll decide what the symbols represent. And I like to interpret the story cubes in a metaphoric or symbolic way. So I often try and not take it too literally. So if it's cogs, I might talk about things like inventing something or building a machine, or idea that people are creating something collectively together. This is a really great game for families because it really helps to build a decent conversation around storytelling and story building. So the last game I want to talk to you about is a game by a designer I introduced to you earlier. It is Ryan Locket's Sleeping Gods. Dare I say it, this is probably the game of the year. What I really love about this game is the fact that if you've ever played the game The Legend of Zelda Wind Waker, you actually have your own little boat and you can travel to any island you like. That game is basically this as a board game. Players are going to be getting this map that looks like this, and they're going to be traveling around to different islands. So you'll be thinking, how do I travel around to different islands? Well, it comes with what we call an atlas book. And basically every rectangular map that's featured on this piece of paper also appears in this book. You'll move your ship across the pages to visit different locations, different islands, different places of interest that each have their own sub-story and character arcs. This game is expansive. It is absolutely going to take you hours to complete, but the sessions that you'll have will be brilliant. There are so many different storylines, complications, areas to explore. It's like you're exploring like 10 different worlds. Imagine you're in Disneyland and one side of Disneyland is like Tomorrowland, and then you've got Adventureland, and then Toontown, and then you're just moving across all the different places around Disneyland. This is basically that in this book. But what I really love about this is that when you encounter like a creature, there's a whole nother sub-game in this actual game itself. And it probably has one of the most creative ways of combating that I've seen in any board game. And basically you get a creature card that has a little grid, and you've got to try and cover that grid and cover the weak points with damage. Story elements that come from it also come from this very expanded encounter book. And whichever location you go to will have a number, and then players will be reading from those particular spots. So that will add a lot of flavor to your game experience. In terms of new board games that have piqued my interest recently, the Artisans of Splendent Vale is a game that's now on Kickstarter that has really tapped into this element of storytelling. It's a game where players can choose from 1 to 4 characters, and it sounds like if you're playing with only 2 players and you can choose only 2 characters, it's not going to really diminish your experience at all. But basically each character comes with their own little book, and players are going to be exploring a map. They're going to be encountering certain challenges that they'll need to resolve. That includes combat. There's the use of a dice pool to allocate particular actions based on what is rolled on that particular round. But what I really like about this game is the fact that you get to see the world through the eyes of the characters. Now, I like the diversity that is presented in the 4 main characters. I also really like the art style and the presentation of this game, and how each character can acquire little stickers that kind of change the way they look. So you can kind of see how you can customize the way the character appears, as well as each character has their own unique character sheets, which is kind of like a little mini game or mini challenge in itself. There's one character that's collecting runes, one that mixes potions together. It just has this sense of asymmetry, but through a character representation mode. It also comes with an action scene 70-page book that has lots of different maps that players will encounter and resolve encounters on. So there's heaps to explore. The box is probably as big as Sleeping Gods. Important to note, it is a fully cooperative game, and I think that once you start playing, you've got to kind of finish the game, and then you've got to buy a recharge pack, I think, that will help to reset the game if you want to play it from the beginning again. So have you played any games recently that have a really strong storytelling element where you feel like you're walking the character's shoes? If so, definitely write it in the comments below. I can't wait to check them out. Also, if you have any questions that you'd like to ask, definitely add them in the comments and I'll try and get to them in the next video. Before I go, if you really want to support this channel, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video, as well as heading over to my Patreon and Facebook page if you want to get all the latest news. Thank you once again for joining me for another Board Game Sanctuary video. This is Danny signing out. See you guys next time. Goodbye.